Hey Clemson, we got a show for you tonight, so sit back, relax, and welcome to the very first episode of The Midnight Tiger. Welcome to The Midnight Tiger. I'm your host, John Nola. My guest tonight is an astounded man who started this very little program that I can help grow, that I'm a part of, and someone else from Tigervision is a part of. Ladies and gentlemen, would you help me welcome Mr. Thomas Beeson? Thank you so much for being here on our very first show.
Well, thank you, John. Appreciate it.
So, as many people don't know, but Clemson's autism program is fairly new. Well, would you like to explain how it started?
Sure. Well, this is our kind of sixth cohort of students, John. And it started because Clemson kind of realized that some autistic students need a little extra support to do their best in college.
As someone who was diagnosed on the spectrum from a very young age, I've seen this program firsthand and how it works. Could you explain how?
Sure. So we support students wherever they're at in college, right? So from first-year students up through super seniors, and we provide a variety of different supports, which includes kind of one-on-one meetings, class that students can take each semester,
yes,
structured study times, and just to kind of help connecting them to campus resources.
Gotcha. So, this is fairly new. So it started in 2019. Mm-hmm. It was rough during COVID. And
Absolutely. Everything was rough during COVID, right?
Yeah.
We were online during COVID. Imagine that.
No kidding. It was torture. So because of that, has there ever been any dips during those years?
So can you say a little bit more about that?
So as COVID was going through, I'm pretty sure it was tough for students to be focused on class and with mask wearing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it was all very awkward during those times, right? We weren't sure whether we were going to be on campus or off campus, and meetings had to sometimes be done on Zoom, right?
Yep.
Classes were on Zoom.
Yep.
And then we had a whole year where we were, maybe it wasn't a year, it seems like a year where we were wearing masks most of the time. So yeah, it was pretty awkward.
Yeah.
Pretty awkward.
I'm sure the folks and viewers at home would like to know how someone can get involved with the Spectrum program.
Sure. So if someone's a Clemson student and they want to participate in the program, then all they really need to do is reach out. So they could reach out to me at Accessibility Services, or Ms. Erin Siders, who also works for the Spectrum program at Accessibility Services.
Who was supposed to be here, but unfortunately she felt a little under the weather.
Absolutely. But she's doing better, I think.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Or if there's a student who we have student interns.
Yes.
So if a student who wants to be an intern, they could also reach out, and that would be participating in a different capacity.
I see. And you don't just hire regular undergraduate students, but you also hire graduates as well.
So right, so we do have a few graduate students who are doing graduate assistantships. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right, John.
Yes. And what would they like to focus on mostly? And do they want to focus in the field of special needs, or?
I think it varies. I think a lot of students, say, who are interns, are focused on perhaps being in counseling. Mm-hmm. And so they see this as a way to develop and test out their kind of skills one-on-one mm-hmm. with people.
I see. And with the increasing rate of people being diagnosed with autism, I'm sure other colleges would like to follow in the same thing. I know a few of them do, like Rutgers, Penn State, and Michigan do also big D1 schools with programs.
Yeah, so
how do you think Clemson differentiates?
Well, so first off, we're the only program in South Carolina. And in fact, we're the only program in either of the Carolinas. So there are not any programs in North Carolina at this point in time either. And we're one of the few programs kind of in the Southeast. So Alabama does have a program, mm-hmm. and Emory University has a program. but most schools in the Southeast, with the exception of, say, Florida, where there are a number of programs, don't really have an enhanced support program for autistic students at their college or university.
Ah, I see. So if a parent is concerned about their child with autism, like how do I say this? How do people know if their child has autism? Like, what do you recommend for the parents to do?
So we're talking about a very young child, perhaps,
or around the time of going to college.
Around to college. So that's an interesting point, because some people are identified as being autistic or identify as being autistic at a very young age, right? Even as young as maybe 2 years old, right?
I was.
But there are other people who don't even realize that they're autistic until much later in life. And so we've had students in the program who are identified at age 2, and we've had students participate who actually don't even have an autism diagnosis. They just feel that they're autistic, and maybe they have some other neurodivergent diagnosis. John.
And I know there's therapy on campus, and you recommend a lot of that stuff to the fellow students.
So, some students can benefit from mental health counseling, but that's just not autistic students, right? That's any college student.
Yes.
College can be pretty stressful and can really kind of impact students' mental health, regardless of who they are, where they're from, what their background is, and what their neurology is.
Yes.
So counseling can be beneficial for students at certain times during college, for sure.
Yes.
And a student who's in the program who wants to access that service may receive some assistance from the program in getting that kind of set up for them.
Yes. Now, as a fellow student of the Spectrum program, from what I've experienced, it's pretty interesting how it works and how much you care about the students and their growth.
Well, thank you for saying that, John.
Of course.
Yeah. We really do. I think you have to care about students to work at a university.
Yeah.
Imagine someone who worked at a university who didn't care about students.
That would be miserable.
Yeah, it seems like they would be miserable, and so would the students that they had to work with, right?
Yep.
But part of what we try to do is, I think sometimes autistic people feel that they've been maybe judged or labeled or maybe made to feel uncomfortable at times.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure that we're creating a very safe space for people so that they don't have to worry about that.
Yes, and I do have to confirm that the Spectrum program is not part of Clemson Life.
Oh, absolutely. So Clemson Life is a separate program. Clemson Life is for students who have an intellectual disability.
Yes.
And a lot of autistic people do have an intellectual disability, John, as you know.
Yes.
But the Clemson Spectrum program is for students who are pursuing a college degree, right? So a bachelor's degree in some field of their interest to them.
Yes, and it's mostly high-functioning students who are on the spectrum.
Well, you have to be high functioning to get into Clemson,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Very high functioning.
Yes. So, if someone is applying for the Spectrum program, like, what else do you look for besides autism?
So, it's kind of interesting. We accept all students who are interested and have a neurodivergent diagnosis. So, if the student gets into Clemson and they're interested in support while they're here, or for their whole college career, or even just for part of their college career, then we're really happy to provide that for them.
Of course. And I'm sure people out there would like to know, like, the other people who work in the Academic Success Center with you besides Ms. Erin Siders.
Sure. So the Spectrum program is part of accessibility services at Clemson, which, as you are aware, helps all students manage academic or housing accommodations on campus. We're also kind of under the broader umbrella of undergraduate learning. So we are connected closely with the Academic Success Center and the kind of coaches and tutoring support that's there, as well as other resources under undergraduate learning.
Yes. Now, I've known you since last November when I came to visit for my tour.
Right.
And we've gotten to know each other a little bit more, especially over the summer program that we had for Spectrum.
Absolutely, John.
So, how would you like to explain how? Would you like to explain how this, like in the summer, how it worked, like the classes and activities?
Sure. So we do offer an optional summer program for incoming first-year students, which is designed to give them, I guess, a head start on college, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 3-week program in July where students come, take a couple classes, get used to living in a dorm, get used to navigating campus and find out about what's available on campus. It also gives us a chance to get to know them.
Yes.
And to get to know how maybe we can best support them when fall semester starts.
Yes. And how many people roughly join the Spectrum program each year? Because I know it started off like with about 4 students.
4 students, right. So we have anywhere from maybe 10 to 18 students who have participated each year, like added on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Newly participated. So our numbers now are at about 54 students.
And how many of them have graduated or graduate students?
So we've had 4 program graduates, and we should have another 4 program graduates this December, and probably 6 or 7 program graduates in May. So we're reaching that point, we're a newer program, right?
Yes.
So we're reaching that point where some of the initial students are finishing up their studies.
So the OGs, and do you have a message for them, like words of wisdom for their future beyond Clemson?
For those students?
Yes.
Just to be very confident, right? Clemson is difficult, so if you can get a degree from Clemson and be successful in college, then I think you're going to be successful in life.
Very nice, very nice. Now, since I've known you since I'm in the program, I know that you're a coffee snob.
Very much so, yes. I even roast my own coffee, John.
I've seen.
Yeah.
You have a little.
Don't bring me any crappy coffee, all right? But what do you want to know about that?
What's like your go-to coffee flavor? Because I'm sure I've only seen you drink dark roast.
Yeah, well, no, that's not true. So I prefer a city roast coffee,
Ooh.
okay, which is a roast where it doesn't yet have any oily sheen on it. So you may have seen some coffee beans that are kind of shiny.
Yeah.
So that, I don't want that. When you're roasting coffee, you want coffee to be roasted just before that point.
Yes.
For the most part.
Yes.
Some people do prefer a much darker roast.
Do you add any creamer or anything?
I mean, maybe not creamer, but I mean, I go to Starbucks and get, some fancy stuff once in a while.
Some fancy latte.
Vanilla sweet cream, whatever they have,
Yes.
or, cold brew.
Yes. And I know it's a couple's affair because your wife also works at Clemson in the Watch Center.
That's true. That's true. She's the director of the Office of Teaching Effectiveness and Innovation at Clemson.
So
Fancier than me.
yes, I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
So what's
I think she's actually the executive director, John, if you want to be,
So how does that work out? Like working in the same area in Clemson?
Honestly, we never see each other. The only time I ever see her is if she's eating lunch outside the Academic Success Center.
And how long have you two been married?
Wow, that's a very good question. 30 plus years, John.
Wow.
Yes.
My parents are only a little bit past 20, so
Yeah. Well,
you're farther ahead than them.
It adds up.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you don't have any choice. You're just married.
Yeah. So back to the special program. What made you start this program?
Oh, so I was not involved in the decision to start the program. Mm-hmm. That was really the brainchild of Margaret Camp, who's my boss, and is the director of accessibility services at Clemson.
Yes.
But I can tell you that it was in response to, as I kind of said before, a recognition of the needs that exist on campuses, not just Clemson,
Yes.
but most college campuses, that Sometimes autistic students don't always get the support that they need to be successful, and don't always reach out for the support that's available to them.
Yeah.
And so having something that would provide that kind of more proactively
Yeah.
for students rather than reactively seemed as important.
Yes, and how long have you been like working in autistic regions?
How long have I worked with individuals who are
on the spectrum.
autistic? Wow. So I actually have an autistic son. So one metric that I use, John, is that I've been working with autistic people for as long as my son's been alive. But I also worked before that with, I think the first autistic young man that I worked with was a middle school student back in the 90s.
Ooh.
So a long time. A long time.
Now, I know.
And he actually didn't have an autism diagnosis because back then, John, as you may be aware, as you said, higher functioning people with autism, people who weren't like your classic kind of
nonverbal,
right, autistic person, tended to get other diagnoses. So he actually had an ADHD diagnosis and a childhood schizophrenia diagnosis.
Now, I know there's different types of autism. That's why it's called a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And low functioning, like, have you ever like encountered low functioning?
So I've worked with autistic people who were geniuses or are geniuses, and I've worked with autistic people who had no verbal communication and really were unable to be tested in terms of intellectual ability. So I've worked with a complete range of people in my lifetime, both autistic and non-autistic.
I see. So, as I'm sure the world knows, America as a whole has autism on the rise.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too sure about the world. Like, how would you say autism is outside of the U.S.? How it's treated?
Countries vary a little bit. Of course, different countries have slightly different diagnostic criteria for autism, John.
Mm-hmm.
And some countries, diagnosis is more readily available than in other countries. And in some countries, having some sort of neurodivergent diagnosis is more acceptable than other countries. So one of the things that we have in this country is, relatively robust evaluation and support services,
Yes.
right, in comparison to much of the rest of the world. I think a better appreciation and acceptance of people who have some neurological differences, right?
Yes.
Appreciation for neurodivergence, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think also educational services that can benefit autistic people.
Yes.
And so there is kind of an incentive to get diagnoses so that so that your child or a person can receive the support and services that will benefit them best.
Yes. So throughout my school life, as I'm going to tell people again, I was diagnosed with autism around the age of 3. And the school system I was in was really bad. So do you have any advice for any school services that might not fully know how to?
So I think it is really hard,
Yes.
isn't it? And I think schools are much better equipped today than they were, 15 to 20 years ago. But I think that for most autistic children who are diagnosed at an early age, John, a lot of the support services that they're going to get are going to be, frankly, outside of the school, right? That the school's important. Obviously, it's where students spend a lot of time. But I think that many autistic children benefit from other support and therapeutic services that are ancillary or outside of the regular school hours.
Yes. So is there a place close to Clemson, South Carolina that that students could go to that you recommend?
Oh, so I think it depends on the type of services that someone wants. There are a variety of different therapeutic services that are available to autistic kids. And I think Project Hope in Greenville has a variety of services, and that's probably the largest and the biggest kind of comprehensive service program that exists in the upstate of South Carolina that I'm aware of.
Yes. Now, I know a lot of students get bullied. I was one of those students who got bullied in high school for autism, and it's really bad on the mental health. And I'm sure students out there have, like you said, have been bullied for being on the spectrum. And how do you think schools should deal with that head on?
How should high schools and middle schools deal with that, or how should colleges do that?
Both.
So I think it's very hard because often bullying occurs at times when the school doesn't have a lot of supervision or involvement, right?
Yeah.
It tends to be rather covert, so to speak, right? I think it's really important for schools to have a strong policy against bullying and also be aware of those students who are likely to be bullied.
Yeah.
And to be very kind of supportive and protective of victims of bullying. That it really can have long-term impacts on someone's mental health.
I see.
I think it's also important to remember that a lot of kids are bullied, right? And so it's not just autistic kids who need to, well, we need to make sure that we've taken bullying seriously, but really any student, at any level, that should be taken very seriously. I hope there's less bullying that occurs in college. I think there is, frankly.
Have you noticed any of it since you've been here?
So I've occasionally had a few students at Clemson who, it may not be that they were bullied per se, but they may have had difficult relationships with suite mates or roommates, and it may be that they weren't able to advocate or speak up for themselves as well, and so it turned into kind of a situation where they weren't able to get their way, or they weren't able to speak up for themselves, and so we could call that bullying, or we'd say that feels a lot like bullying. So it was a bad situation, yes. And in that situation, I think that the nice thing about college is you're not stuck with people, right? You can move to a different living arrangement, or you can choose to hang out with different people. You're not as stuck as you are, say, in high school or middle school.
I see. Now, there's many programs here on Clemson's campus, and I know a lot of people in the Spectrum program are majoring in technology stuff, technology majors like
so
engineering.
We have a lot of students who major in technology. We also have students in, I think, 20 plus majors at this time, though. So it's quite varied, quite varied.
And there's also a lot of clubs and events on campus that students can go to. So if you were to recommend just a couple clubs or events for Spectrum students to go to, what would you recommend?
Oh, wow. Well, so Tigervision, for one, there have been a number of students who have participated in Tigervision over the years.
Guilty as charged.
And I think the Board Game Club is another club that's been pretty popular. Smash Bros.
Yes.
Club. And then a lot of students, of course, play D&D. But really, almost any club. We have students who are really into fishing, students who are really into the other outdoor activities, students who participated actively in intramural sports, or even in club sports at Clemson. So it's really quite a variety. The main thing is, and also religious organizations. I think the main thing is finding a club or organization that you feel is right for you and values your time and skills, right?
Yes.
And where you feel comfortable.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. College can be a pretty lonely place if you don't find your place.
Now, spectrum students have like a lot, like it could be a range of things like sensibility, and sometimes like nonverbal with low functioning could be tough. What's the biggest concern with the spectrum students? Because most of us are high functioning.
So what do I see as things that students struggle with,
Yes.
John? Okay, so a few things. One is students just struggle with college because they're college students, right?
Yeah.
So some of the struggles that autistic college students have
We live off of ramen.
are no different than any college student, right?
Yeah.
Is the food in the cafeteria going to be decent? You know,
Yeah.
that's not just an autistic challenge.
No,
right?
I've had a problem with that.
Yeah.
So.
But in particular, I think there are three things that tend to impact autistic college students a bit more than maybe non-autistic college students, right?
Yes.
And the first one is some autistic people have what are kind of called sensitivities to certain noise or lights or smells, right? It's kind of sensory sensitivities or sensory
Yes.
differences.
Yes.
And those can be really impactful on someone's just kind of day-to-day functioning, right? So if you need a certain temperature to be able to sleep and you're more sensitive to temperature than the average person, then that's just not a small problem. That could be the difference between getting a good night's rest and being sleep deprived for your entire college career,
Yeah.
right? Or if you're bothered by certain sounds, that could be the difference between being able to learn in a classroom or being completely bothered by the classroom and not able to learn anything for an entire lecture time,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Now, as someone who is on the spectrum, like again, I keep on bringing this up, people. I don't know why. I have the man in charge of the program right here. So, one thing I have to say for parents to do when your child has autism is just to love them as a whole. Like, love them no matter what. It's just a few flaws in their character. What would your message be? Like, what did you say to your son when he was diagnosed?
Oh, I don't even remember. I think that your message, though, is very good, John, that what everyone needs is to be accepted for who they are, right?
Correct.
And autism isn't necessarily a deficit, right?
No, it's not.
Autistic people have tremendous aptitudes as well, and the important thing is to just accept people and not be judgmental, and also not try to make someone something that they're not,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Like, don't treat them any differently. Just treat them how they want to be treated.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I think oftentimes autistic people feel judged
Yes.
and devalued,
I was.
and as you mentioned, bullied, right? And so that can lead to, low esteem, right? And maybe lack of confidence at times.
Yes.
And so it's very important that anyone who's trying to teach or support or supervise or just be friends with an autistic person, to make sure that they're not kind of repeating that pattern.
Yeah. Now, mental health is a big part of someone on the spectrum, and suicide has been like a big concern for mental health in recent years. How would you say people on a spectrum have, like, if they feel suicidal? What do you think is your percentage of that?
Oh, so I don't really have a good number. I would hate to share an inaccurate figure, John, but we both know that autism does not lead to suicide, but autistic people tend to maybe have experiences which impact their mental health at a rate that is greater than the average person does.
Yeah.
And so over time, that can lead to depression and other mental health issues.
Yes.
Also, I think sometimes autistic people tend to be less communicative, right? It is at its heart a difference related to communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes autistic people might be suffering, but they're suffering in silence and not reaching out. So I think that what I would recommend to an autistic person who is feeling depressed, perhaps having some suicidal ideation, is that they need to recognize that. And even if it's difficult, let someone else know.
Yes. Wise words, wise words. Now, before we go.
Sure. Yes, let's end on a more positive note.
Yes. I don't want my first show to be canceled after one
That's
episode.
right.
So I just want to talk about like how people can reach out to for Spectrum, like parents, like do you take visits from?
Absolutely. So if someone's maybe a high school student or maybe a possible transfer student, how would they find out or connect or just get more information,
Yes,
right?
Yes, would you like to plug?
I could plug, sure. So what we really like to do, John, as you know, is when someone comes to our campus tour, we like to meet with them and their family and just kind of get to know each other,
Yes.
right? A little bit. But really, I talk to people on the phone, email,
Yeah.
and all the social media. We have a Facebook page, mainly for the parents.
Yeah.
We do have an Instagram page that we don't use that much.
Yeah, I noticed.
But yeah, really just reaching out, and then also just reaching out to accessibility services, right? So if someone may not know about the Spectrum program, but they may reach out to accessibility services, and in talking with them, that might be mentioned.
Well, I thank you for being my first guest, and
Well, John, it was great.
you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, good. Next week? Hopefully, there's someone else next week.
Well, maybe on a special occasion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes. Like it could be like the people who are like on SNL for like 4 or 5 times, right?
Yeah, the 5-timers.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
the 5-timers, and I get that stupid jacket.
I'm going to be waiting for my jacket then.
You ain't getting no
I
jacket.
get Clemson, maybe a Clemson hoodie. I get your hoodie. 5 times I get your hoodie.
You're not getting this hoodie. It won't even fit you.
Oh.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in, and I want to thank my guest, Mr. Thomas Beeson, and we'll see you next week. Good night.